They came on horses, slick-haired, sharp-eyed men in polished boots who smelled of oil and empire. Their spurs cut into the dry dust of Painted Valley like they owned it. They passed the shrine of bones the villagers had stacked to warn outsiders. They laughed at it. They passed the well Nora's husband had dug with his bare hands. They spat in it. No one stopped them, because no one could. Not anymore. The valley had been quiet since the floods took the Redpath man, and the fever took their baby girl. Nora Redpath, now widowed and childless, lived like a stone. She spoke to no one, wore black even in summer, carried her water from the stream alone. The neighbors whispered that she'd gone mad from grief. The elders whispered something deeper. She was raised by the knife people, one said, eyes darting. The Apaches taught her silence, said another. Silence and shadows. But time eats even the sharpest memories, and by the time the men from the east came to buy out the valley for mining, no one remembered what her silence meant, until it was too late. It started with a knock that wasn't a knock, a banging, the kind you do when you want someone to know they don't have a choice. Nora didn't answer, not the first time, not the second. By the third time, they kicked in the door of the old adobe house. 3 men stood in her kitchen, one with a rolled-up deed, another with a smile like a fox with a broken jaw, and the last with a pistol tucked into his belt like it was part of his skin. "Widow Redpath," said the man with the papers, "your land's about to be worth a fortune. You should sell before the ground beneath your feet turns into gold, or ash." Nora said nothing. She didn't look up from her fire. "You deaf?" the pistol man said, stepping closer. "We're offering you freedom, money, a way out of this shack. You're what, 40? You got no kids, no man. What you hanging onto this dirt for?" Nora stirred the pot once, then twice, then once more. The fox smile man put a boot on her hearth. "Lady, we don't need your signature. Just trying to be civil. But civil only lasts so long in these parts." Only then did she look up, slowly, like a mountain waking. And what they saw in her eyes wasn't grief. It was memory. The kind that chills blood. The men left with curses on their lips, threats in their breath. But they left. Not because she'd spoken. She hadn't. They left because something in her silence unsettled them. But they'd be back. They always came back. By nightfall, the valley elders gathered at the edge of her field. They didn't approach the house, only watched from the brush. "She will burn this place down before she signs," said old Bapuji, who still wore the eagle bone necklace from his warrior days. "She was trained by the Black Knives, wasn't she?" whispered Lata, the midwife. "The ones who vanished into the cliffs?" "Her mother was taken by them during the wars," said another. "Raised like a son, fought like one too." "Then married Thomas Redpath," Lata added. "Settled. Birthed a daughter. Buried them both. And now, here we are." No one knew what she would do. They only knew what she could. 3 nights passed. Then came the fire. Not at Nora's home, but at the southern fence of her field. Her peach. Trees burned, her goats scattered. A charred piece of parchment with the mining company's seal fluttered in the smoke. The men had come again, this time unseen. They wanted her afraid. They wanted her broken. But the next morning, the only thing they found at the sheriff's office was a single knife buried into the oak door. Old, worn, Apache forged. The sheriff read the note it pinned, 5 words. "I don't sell to thieves." That night, they took her. 4 men, cloth over faces, knives ready. They waited, near the stream, where the rocks hid shadows, where the frogs stopped singing, where they thought she'd come to collect water like always. And she did, with a copper pot on her head and silence in her step. The first man grabbed her by the braid. The second, hit her behind the knees. The third covered her mouth, though. She made no sound. The fourth held the knife. They tied her hands, dragged her into the woods. One laughed and said, "She ain't much for words, is she?" The leader sneered, "She'll scream before dawn." They built a fire, sat around it, mocked her silence. But they didn't know what the old warriors taught. They didn't know what it meant to hold breath for hours, to make pain a friend, to watch the wind for signs. They didn't see how her fingers worked the knots, how her eyes never blinked, how she was listening, not to them, to the earth. The leader knelt beside her, his hand brushing her face. He whispered, "You'll tell us where you keep the deed before we start carving pieces." She looked at him once, and for the first time in 10 years she spoke. Her voice was calm, even soft, but it carried the weight of thunder. "You should have brought more men." For a moment they laughed. Men like them always laughed before they bled. "You got a tongue after all," smirked the second man, tightening the grip on his knife. "But talk won't help you, widow." They didn't notice the rope around, her wrists slipping down like a second skin. They didn't notice her left foot shift ever so slightly, heel pressing into the packed soil. They didn't know the name Redpath was only half of her blood. The other half was fire. It happened between heartbeats. The man standing closest dropped to his knees, choking, not from pain, but confusion. His own blade was in his neck. His fingers tried to pull it out, but his strength had already left him. The second reached for his pistol, but Nora had already rolled, kicked his leg sideways at the joint, and sent him tumbling face first into the fire. The third lunged, thinking she was distracted. He didn't see the flat obsidian shard she pulled from beneath her sash. She didn't stab him. She cut him, across the thigh, across the belly, across the wrist, in perfect arcs that flowed like river water. He screamed like a broken horn. The last man, the leader, stepped back, not out of fear, but calculation. He drew a curved knife and smiled. "You really were one of them." Nora didn't answer. She crouched low, knife in each hand, face still, body loose like a shadow slipping from stone. The fight that followed would one day become a whisper among the painted valley hills. They moved in circles, silent, save for the clash of steel and the rustle of dust underfoot. He slashed. She ducked. He feinted. She flowed. His blade kissed her shoulder, but hers danced across his ribs. He was trained in alley fights, bar fights, dirt ring brawls. She was trained by the black knives to strike not for pain, but for silence, to kill with one blow, not 3. But tonight wasn't about killing. Not yet. Tonight was a warning. When the man fell, bleeding but alive, she knelt beside him, spat at her boot. "It's just land," he croaked. "A damn patch of dirt. What's it to you?" She looked toward the east, where her husband once walked across the hills to bring her wild honey. She looked toward the west, where they buried her daughter, under a tree that never blossomed again. Then back to him. Her voice, again, was calm. "You came for land, but you trespassed on memory." By dawn, the sheriff found 3 bodies tied upright to the old cotton tree at the crossroads. Their wounds were clean, non-lethal. Their mouths were stuffed with mining contracts. One of them, the leader, had a message carved lightly across his chest with surgical precision. "Tell your masters, the valley does not forget." The mine boss was not a man used to hearing no. He had leveled 2 hill towns, burned 1 forest to the ground, married 3 women, and buried 2. When he read the message, he only blinked once. Then he sent men, more of them, rougher, and this time he sent 1 woman. Her name was Miriam Kane, ex-marshal, disgraced for shooting her captain in the back. The boss told her one thing: break the widow, or bury her. Miriam didn't ask questions. She rode alone into Painted Valley, dressed in black, like a raven on the hunt. Nora watched her from afar, from the ridgeline behind her home, where the pines still whispered secrets. She saw the horse, the stance, the gun, not a thug, a killer, someone who, maybe once, had her own memory to protect. Miriam found the adobe house empty, found the hearth cold, found a single bowl of herbs left on the table steaming. She didn't eat it. She wasn't stupid. She sat and waited. The sun dipped low. No footsteps came, only a single knife falling from the ceiling beam like a leaf. It landed beside her hand with the lightest thud. Attached was a note. Meet me where the sky forgets. Its name, the old folk called it Bone Ridge, where the Apache buried their knife fighters and where no birds ever nested. Miriam didn't hesitate. She rode out at dusk. What happened at Bone Ridge was never spoken about. But villagers said they heard two women shouting in a forgotten tongue. And then, nothing. Silence that bled into the earth. 3 days later, Miriam Kane rode back through town, alone. No bruise, no scar, but her gun was gone, and her horse moved slower. When the sheriff asked her what happened, she only said, "She buried her dead in that valley. I saw them. The way she stood at each grave, like a soldier at a gate." "Did you fight her?" the sheriff asked. Miriam looked away. "No, I saw what she was, and what I was becoming, and I let her win." The mine boss was furious. He sent no more letters, only a bomb. They placed it beneath her bed. But the house was empty that night. She was already gone into the cliffs, gone to wake the ones who still remembered the knife songs. And by the time the men came with fire and oil, they didn't find a widow, they found a war. They came with flames and machines, 30 men on horseback and 5 steam carts, each carrying barrels of pitch and greed. They didn't ride into town. They didn't bother with papers. They came straight for her land, for her trees, for her memory. But they didn't know she had summoned the wind. She had walked the cliffs days before, speaking to the elders who had once taught her how to walk without being seen, how to stab without spilling blood, how to make silence more dangerous than screams. She found them. Not all, but enough. Old warriors, wounded men, 2 women with eyes like mountain wolves. Each carried a blade in their belt and history in their lungs. They didn't ask why. She had come. They only nodded. One said, "You finally remembered who you are." Another said, "We never stopped watching your valley." So they came, quiet, like ghosts, one by one. When the oil men reached the border of her land, a line of fires lit across the ridge, not a threat, but a signal. She was home, and she was not alone. The attack began with a scream, not from Nora, from the first man who stepped onto her field and found a pit beneath his feet, sharpened bamboo soaked in poison. He screamed once, then never again. The others drew guns, but no one was there. Only whispers in the trees, shadows in the dust. Then came the arrows, not to kill, to scatter. They ran in panic, and panic made them stupid. They set fire to the trees. But the trees didn't burn, because the sap had been soaked with river water. The wind turned. Smoke blinded them, and in that smoke, Nora came. Not in silence this time. She moved like a blade dancing in wind. Every slash was a memory, every step a name. Thomas, Lily, her mother, her people. She fought not with rage, but with memory sharpened into precision. Men fired wildly. One bullet grazed her cheek. She didn't flinch. She threw her blade. It struck a man in the hand, pinning him to a cartwheel. Another rushed her. She ducked, disarmed, twisted his elbow until it cracked, then left him crying in the dust. The mine boss watched from the ridge above, binoculars shaking. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "A woman," his bodyguard whispered. "Just a woman." "No," he said. "She's a tribe." By nightfall, the fields were littered with the broken. None dead, but all defeated. Nora stood at the edge of her property, wrapped in a shawl woven by her grandmother, the obsidian blade at her waist dripping only with dust and sweat. She hadn't killed a single man. That was the lesson. To hurt without hate, to defend without bloodlust, to remind without erasing. She waited as the last cart rolled away, broken axle creaking, then turned to the hill, where the mine boss still watched and waited. He came down the next day, alone, unarmed, coughing from smoke and shame. She was tending the earth, as if nothing had happened. "You win," he said, voice dry. She didn't answer. "I'll pull out. My men, they won't come back." Still, she said nothing. "Why didn't you kill them?" he asked. Her hand paused over the soil. She looked up, eyes calm, voice quiet. "Because your greed will eat you faster than my knife ever could." He left. A different man, not better, just broken enough to never return. But Nora did not return to silence. Not fully. That night, she stood before the valley, at the old well her husband dug, and sang. Not a happy song, not a mourning song. A song of memory. The villagers came out. They stood in silence, listening, learning. By morning, 3 girls had come to her, each carrying an old blade their grandmothers once hid, each saying the same thing: "Teach me." The rains came late that year. Not soft rains, but heavy, angry ones, washing away ash and footprints, flooding the gullies, soaking the graves at the edge of Nora's land. Still, she stood in it, face lifted, shawl soaked, hands outstretched, like she was greeting an old friend. She had not forgotten what she lost, but the land had finally remembered her. Weeks passed. The company didn't return, but something else did. A letter. No name, no seal. Only one sentence written in charcoal. On hide. "The knife you buried has been dug up." Nora read it once, then burned it. She knew what it meant. Someone from her past, someone from the days when blades meant law and silence meant survival, was walking again. And they weren't like her. They hadn't healed. 3 days later, smoke rose from the mountain trail. A village torched. Bodies found in ritual positions. Blades left in their palms, eyes closed, no wounds visible. It was a message. Not for fear, but for memory. Only she would understand it. The mark carved into a tree beside the ashes, a spiral inside a square. Only one man used that. Talako, her brother. Blood brother by oath. Knife brother by training. The one who vanished the night she married Thomas Redpath. The one who said love makes you soft. The one who once whispered, "If you leave the blade, it will return to cut your own hand." Now he had returned. Not for her land, for her loyalty. He came at night, not quietly. She was already waiting. No blades. Just firelight between them. He stood, cloaked in wolf hide, eyes sharp with history, scars crisscrossing his forearms like a map. "You chose the world of men," he said. "I chose peace," she replied. "They burned your husband. They buried your child. And I did not become them. You forgot who you are." She stepped forward. "No, I remembered who I wanted to be." He drew his blade. She didn't flinch. "I'm not here to kill you," he said. "I'm here to ask." "Ask what? Will you lead them?" "Who?" He turned to the hills. From the mist came 30 shadows, masked, silent, young, children of war, of forgotten blood, orphans, outcasts, trained in blade, trained in silence. They have no tribe, only knives. They need a name, a path. She looked at them. She saw herself, at 17, hiding in the cliffs, carving her name into bark just to feel real. She looked at Talako and said nothing. That night, she lit a fire no one had lit in 20 years, the fire of the circle, where no one speaks until the knife is passed, where each person tells the truth, not for power, but to lay down their burden. They sat. She passed the blade. Each one spoke stories of abuse, of hunger, of betrayal, of memory, of revenge. And she listened. At the end, she took the knife, held it to her chest, and spoke. We do not kill for silence. We protect it. We do not strike to punish. We strike to remember. If you follow me, you must bury your hate. One by one, they nodded. Talako was the last. He hesitated, then dropped his knife into the fire, and cried. Years passed. Painted Valley healed. Not through violence, through legacy. Girls came to learn how to walk like wind. Boys came to learn how to fight without hate. Men came to lay down their knives and learn names instead. Nora taught them all, but she never stopped walking the land. One day, her shawl was found on a tree stump beside her daughter's grave. Her blade was buried beside it. She was never seen again. But every spring, a wildflower no one could name bloomed there, red as blood, soft as dusk. Moral twist. The mine. Company returned a decade later, bigger, richer, with papers this time. But when they dug, they struck nothing, because the land had swallowed itself, turned to stone. Because greed can erase memory, but the knife remembers. And sometimes, a woman's silence speaks louder than a nation's law.